Google is building the XRP killer. Well, and that's at least what the sensationalists are claiming, and it could not be further from the truth. I've been analyzing this development and hearing the most knowledgeable people's opinions about it. And after diving deep into Google's actual capabilities and marketing position, I can tell you why it isn't the XRP killer the headlines are making it out to be. And in fact, it may actually validate XRP's entire thesis. By the end of this video, you'll understand the exact way that Google's Universal Ledger actually works and why it's fundamentally different from XRP, despite the surface similarities, okay? And most importantly, why its development could actually strengthen XRP's long-term position in the global payments ecosystem. So the crypto media jumped all over this and straight to conclusions without understanding what Google is actually building, okay? So let's break that down for you. What is Google actually building? Well, GCUL is a private corporate-controlled blockchain for Google's enterprise customers only, okay? It requires permission from Google for every transaction and participant. It's limited to the companies that are already using Google Cloud infrastructure. So no actual cryptocurrency, no decentralization, and no global access. Its Python-based smart contracts are the only thing that works in Google's ecosystem, okay? So some of the key technical differences for people that actually matter here. The GCUL operates like a corporate database with blockchain features. It's not even really a blockchain. It's more of a database than anything else. XRP runs a global permissionless network open to anyone. So it allows for interoperability between people like Google and Bank of America and Meta and all these other large corporations, okay? The Internet of Value is the proposition there, whereas Google's is just a centralized database that they provide to their customers. And Google controls all the validators, and they can shut down the network at any time, okay? XRP's validators operate independently across multiple countries and jurisdictions, and they have to have an 80% quorum for anything to happen on the network or validate any new amendments. And they all validate transactions independent of one another, maintaining the network even if one of them goes down, okay? So Google requires corporate approval for every single transaction. XRPL processes transactions without asking anyone's permission. So people aren't going to just silo themselves and have full exposure to Google's godlike ability inside their own environment, okay? But let's break down what Google's philosophy is versus XRP's mission. Well, Google wants control of the transactions within their corporate ecosystem, which makes sense, right? It's a centralized database. It's permissioned. Only people they know are in there. It's very secure and very fast for their people, but it's not interoperable with other people. XRP enables neutral global value transfer between any parties, okay? So Google could connect to the XRPL and then send value somewhere else outside of their ecosystem. XRP would be the bridge to other people, whereas Google is, again, a siloed, permissioned ecosystem. GCL, again, services Google's customers, but it makes it a lot more efficient for them. They're not using an open, decentralized blockchain where other parties could have problems or, cause issue or delays with stuff that's happening. XRP connects institutions that compete with each other, and it allows them to trust one another. It's a neutral, level playing field where both people can see what's going on, and they don't have to trust that somebody else is doing the right thing. And after '08, it's just not going to happen. Nobody trusts that the other party's doing the right thing. So Google's solution locks users into their technology stack, which is great for a for-profit business, right? But not for a global decentralized network that anybody can use. This is the whole reason people want to move away from the US dollar and SWIFT. The US can lock people out of the system, like they did to Russia, like they've done to Iran. And I'm not here to get into the geopolitics and if those are right or wrong. I'm just saying they have the capability. Whereas XRPL, it works with technology in any institution globally. Now you can blacklist wallets, but you can't freeze XRP and you can't claw it back. So it's much fairer for everybody to participate on that versus, be completely reliant on Google. This is the market intelligence that everyone's missing, okay? No interoperability with other blockchain networks or traditional banks outside Google's system can work in this environment. Google can change the rules, the fees, the access, policies, completely independent of anybody else's participation. Again, your authority is Google inside their environment. It limits international settlements and has controlled partnerships and control of their network, okay? Anything you build inside there, any partnerships, any trust lines, any smart contracts, Google has complete oversight on. You're completely relying on them. And last but not least, they cannot facilitate true cross-border settlements between independent institutions. These large banks aren't going to want to be relying on Google for everything. Even though a lot of the cloud infrastructure, we have AWS, we have Google Cloud, we have Microsoft Azure, there's kind of 3 different parties there, right? And they need interoperability to be able to pass data between those or value, right? And they're going to have a trusted system. It's not going to be owned by any one of them. You need a global protocol that does that. And that's why this actually validates XRP's use case. Google actually confirmed that blockchain technology is the future of institutional payments, not their infrastructure. GCUL's implementation proves why a neutral decentralized network is necessary. These other institutions aren't going to want to have complete oversight given to Google. Okay, they're going to want to operate their own siloed ecosystem that's interoperable. Major tech companies entering the blockchain space also validates that this is $1 trillion market opportunity. I think it's much bigger than that, but that's kind of the headlines on what they're saying. Corporate control, and with corporate control, it demonstrates the need for independent alternatives like XRP. If Microsoft, AWS, and Google all want to be able to exchange value, they need a trusted network to be able to do that between them, and none of them can own that network or be the guiding force on it or have oversight of everything where they can shut the other parties out, because that gives them a competitive advantage. The market is large enough for multiple solutions serving different segments, and all of them, again, need that interoperability that XRP provides. So what's the timeline on this? You got GCUL currently testing with Google's select customers right now. It's kind of in beta. You got Stripe rolling stuff out. You got Circle rolling stuff out. A lot of these big players are starting to move into the ecosystem, but again, they need interoperability between all of them. In 2026, they plan to roll this out to limited Google's existing enterprise clients, and that customer base. It cannot expand beyond Google's corporate ecosystem by design. Like, the whole point is it's a siloed permission database for their customers. And again, that provides a lot of efficiencies, but it doesn't provide interoperability or trust between other counterparties. XRP would be the solution to that, or Hedera, or some of these other large protocols that can move data securely between counterparties that they can trust and validate things on that network. You got Google on the board, on the council for Hedera, Alphabet, YouTube. There's a lot of other players that will work within their own ecosystem, but they need interoperability between tons of other people. And so, again, these global decentralized protocols and the assets that sit on those and move value or data are what they're going to be using. So you need different solutions, and they're completely different markets. And that's really what it comes down to. You need interoperability. You need these siloed ecosystems. You're going to have large corporations and enterprises and institutions that do build these siloed ecosystems, but they're going to have that interoperability. And no one is going to take complete market share because there's too much counterparty risk for other people in that situation. Now, here's the piece that's interesting. Banking interest confirms market segmentation. Okay, you got the CME group testing Google's infrastructure for internal efficiency improvements. You've got the same institutions can use both GCL and the XRPL at the same time. You got corporate blockchain adoption increasing overall in the industry and its awareness. You got this also validates blockchain benefits without threatening XRP's unique position. Okay, and last but not least, it creates more educated market for XRP's global settlement capabilities. The more people that understand this stuff, the more people that are building solutions that are interoperable, the more adoption and price appreciation that you're going to see for XRP at the end of the day. So again, Google building this and taking it to market actually validates that you have the need for these global bridge assets and the interoperability between these ecosystems. So understanding each of these systems, what they can do and what they cannot do, reveals why they're complementary rather than competitive. So again, why does Google's product GCUL help XRP? Well, it validates that blockchain technology for institutions, they're going to be using that for payments. It educates the market about the benefits of XRP being provided for years. So what are the things that actually help XRP become adopted because of Google launching this front? It demonstrates the limitations of corporate controlled networks. So again, too much counterparty risk with Google. A lot of other people are going to go, I would rather use something that's decentralized, open, and interoperable, that's a neutral bridge asset where there's no counterparty that can stop my transactions if they don't like for some reason, which will actually increase the demand for these neutral alternatives, mainly XRP and I think Hedera as well. And it proves market size justifies multiple solutions. You're going to have, this kind of reminds me of what we had when the internet started for email, AOL and Yahoo. If I had Yahoo and I wanted to send you an email when it first came out, You had to have Yahoo. That's a siloed permissioned ecosystem. I couldn't send you an email to your AOL email. But when we got the internet protocol, like the XRPL or distributed ledger technology, that's what allowed for interoperability between those two ecosystems. Now we have the email protocol where I can send you an email from Yahoo to your AOL or your Gmail or your Hotmail or whatever you have. Okay. I think that's a good illustration for people as to like, cool, this is a great database and a siloed ecosystem, and it provides a lot of value and efficiency for the users in this area, but it needs to be able to communicate with other systems. And that's where XRP comes in. So this is actually going to create a network effect. Okay. You have GCUL, it locks users into Google's entire tech ecosystem. XRP connects competing institutions without vendor lock-in. Google's solution cannot actually facilitate transactions between other tech rivals. Again, if you have Microsoft Azure or you've got, Google, AWS, not going to work out here. And again, I think it could be the XRPL, or it might even be Hedera Hashgraph that facilitates the interoperability of the data between those ecosystems. And if you have corporate control, that prevents true global adoption. These other counterparties aren't going to, again, succumb to just one person. Even if you had Microsoft issue, and I'm sure they're working on their global database that's interoperable. And same thing with Amazon. I know that they are. An open protocol that scales throughout the networks is going to have much greater impact and effect than just one single corporate infrastructure that has, a board and CEO and specific counterparties that can tell you if you can or can't transact. It's the same reason people don't want communism, right? If you go to China, they can cut you out of basically everything if they decide that your credit score is too low, your social credit score. Nobody wants that. You need to be able to participate. And if somebody doesn't like you for some reason, they can't just be able to cut you out of a system or the ability to participate in economics. Now, if there's bad actors, you need the ability to remove those people, but that's for the public good, not just because somebody said so. And again, any one of these enterprises is going to want to compete. They're a for-profit company. They're going to want to position themselves ahead of these other counterparties. And if they're having to use their systems, that's what they're going to do. But if it's an open distributed network, they won't have that ability. So with the market positioning, there's different targets. Okay. You got Google, and it optimizes internal corporate processes, whereas XRP enables global cross-border payments and the transfer of data and value between counterparties. You got Google serving its existing customers much more efficiently, whereas XRP isn't open and it's creating new markets and business models. Again, kind of apples and oranges here. I think a lot of people get confused and they want one thing to be the one thing. There's going to be a lot of winners, but it needs interoperability. So you got corporate solutions that work with existing hierarchies. And then you have things like the XRPL that are decentralized protocols that enable new types of collaboration, like DAOs. It's more of a circular entity rather than, most people traditionally would look to the CTO and it would kind of disseminate down from there in a traditional hierarchy. I think that a lot of those dynamics are going to change as we shift to some of these decentralized networks and companies and corporations that are issued on chain. So when it comes down to regulation around this stuff, now that we have some clarity, we have bipartisan advocacy for this asset class, you're going to see a lot of these institutions start to roll out their solutions. And again, we already have, you got Circle with theirs, you've got Stripe, with theirs. And now you got Google with GCUL, and it's going to get immediate approval from Google's existing framework. They don't have to go out and advocate for this stuff. Google just says, hey, go, and they go. It's not like a protocol or the internet that has to have regulations around it. And that's why they would choose that over the other, right? XRP provides a regulatory neutral asset that can move across multiple jurisdictions, whereas Google's kind of siloed. They are a global company, and so they need to move value across all that. And the XRPL would provide a great way for them to do that. With Google itself, you have corporate controls that satisfies institutions while limiting others. Their corporate controls satisfy some institutions, but it limits others. An independent protocol serve institutions the way they want instead of having to be subject to big tech and Google and their controls. So global market is what's needed as an option outside of these corporate ecosystems. And again, that's what the XRPL and Hedera both provide. So what does this mean for global decentralized networks and the assets that sit on those and their adoption? Well, major corporations are validating the increase of overall blockchain adoption with the rollout of their internal systems. Again, they're private permissioned ecosystems, but they need that interoperability. So they need to connect to these open source protocols. And again, this comes back to the education, right? Enterprise education creates more sophisticated buyers for HBAR and XRP and people are like, okay, I see that these systems are going to be created and we need neutral bridges to be able to settle this value and data. I think that these things are going to do well, and you're going to see people, start to understand that we already have. We've already got 7 million wallets for the XRPL, and as back in 2020, it was just 2.5 million wallets at the end of the year when the lawsuit was actually filed. So we almost have 3 times the amount of wallet addresses that we did over the last, 5 years. If there are corporate controls, that's going to concern other institutions and drive them toward the decentralized alternatives. Again, there's just too much counterparty risk if you're subject to, only Microsoft or only Amazon or only Google. You want to be able to diversify across those to be able to mitigate risk. And then also you want interoperability between them. And actually, I think that's going to continue to drive the profitability of all of these even greater or more so than it would if one centralized counterparty were to win out. And that leads to the market expansion rather than market division. So with these private, corporate infrastructures being put out, what's the strategic opportunity for XRP? Well, it's positioned as a neutral alternative to corporate controlled blockchain systems and networks. Again, no counterparty risk. Everybody trusts everybody. They're able to validate transactions. Nobody can stop transactions. It serves institutions wanting blockchain benefits without the reliance on big tech. Again, and people have talked about this, because of Microsoft and Amazon and Google's cloud infrastructure, if one of them were to go down and that's what you were using, you're done, man. A global decentralized network that supported that would be much more robust. You'd have multiple counterparties that were validating those transactions. And if only one of those goes down, it's not the end of the world. Whereas if it's a centralized risk with one of these counterparties, it's kind of a big deal if something bad happens. And it also enables global transactions for these corporate networks. And these siloed ecosystems just can't provide or facilitate that at scale the same way that a global decentralized network like the XRPL or Hedera Hashgraph could. It also validates that they need to be provided interoperability between these different corporate blockchain systems. And again, XRP would sit in between all of them and be utilized in that capacity. Or again, Hedera to be able to move the data between these ecosystems. And last but not least, the opportunity here is strategic innovation. It's impossible with controlled corporate frameworks. You need people building new solutions that solve real world problems on chain. And once these institutions see that, I think you're going to see, over the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of strategic acquisitions by these large corporations as they've grown. You've already started to see this with Ripple. They're making a lot of strategic acquisitions over the last 6 months here in 2025. And I think you're going to see big tech kind of follow suit as they start to adopt these blockchains and global distributed networks. There's going to be other people that build really cool solutions. And that's an opportunity for you if you're going to be one of those people and you can position yourself the right way. So at the end of the day, this actually does, support market expansion rather than the competition. We've got corporate blockchain adoption accelerates the overall industry and its development. You're going to have people seeking different solutions to optimize these different institutional needs. And XRP's neutrality becomes more and more valuable as these corporations adopt these alternatives and multiply and more people come and setting up their own permissioned environment. They're going to want to be interoperable with the big boys. So all that being said, Google's blockchain validates everything XRP has been building toward while demonstrating why a decentralized alternative remains essential for the world and these institutions. The overall blockchain payments market is expanding. XRP's neutral positioning becomes more and more valuable as corporate controlled options highlight the limitations out there if you have a central counterparty. So it really isn't competing between XRP and Google's blockchain. It just validates that blockchain technology is becoming the solution to serve multiple market segments and that corporate networks handling internal efficiencies will open up to protocols like XRP, enabling global innovation and neutral settlement between them and other counterparties that they need to work with. So Google's entry confirms that this is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity in blockchain and for institutional payments. And while it proves that, XRP's approach serves a critical market need that corporation and their solutions can't address. Rather than threatening XRP, the development demonstrates that there's growing demand for these alternatives for big tech and their control over these institutional frameworks and financial frameworks. But at the end of the day, you have to have a neutral bridge asset that allows for interoperability. It's not going to be a winner take all in this circumstance. The analysis I mentioned explains how to position XRP investments to benefit from the market validation while avoiding panic. So if you're invested in XRP and you saw these headlines, don't get too worked up. It's not the end of the world. If anything, it actually validates that XRP and a lot of these distributed ledger networks are going to be the solution that does end up getting adopted for the interoperability between these large enterprises. I mean, this was documented all the way back to 2017 in the presentation that R3 put out. You had Google, you had Android, you had Tesla, you had all of these other large players that were connected to a distributed ledger and the protocol in order to be able to move value between them. And again, it just makes me even more bullish today. Nobody's going to surmount it at this point. The writing's on the wall, and it's obvious to me. And hopefully at this point, it's obvious to you. So if you're wanting deeper insights, what I can offer you is the Beyond Broke Mastermind. We have over 7,000 members implementing a lot of the strategies to secure their crypto positions against the market misconceptions. We unravel all these truths in there. We're asked these questions on a regular basis, and we kind of dispel all the FUD that's out there in the market. So if that sounds cool to you and you want to check that out, you can check out the links below. It's beyondbroke.com, and you can use the code beyondbroke1. MO gets you your first month for $2. They're in social or carbon one, and you're going to get access to a repository of a ton of information. It's like drinking through a fire hose when you get in there. Love the culture that's been built. And again, this is month to month. There's no lock-in contract, and over 7,000 people trust us and want to stay up to date with what we're able to provide. So if that sounds cool to you, we'd love to see you in there. And again, if you found value in this video, please like, subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.